Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me this week is Luna Stower, Head of Impact for iSpire Vape. Thank you very much for joining me today, Luna.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you could reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. Luna, I always like to start the podcast with a little bit of background, especially with somebody as accomplished as yourself. But what was it that first got you involved in the cannabis industry?
I was the co-chair of SSDP and Normal at UC Santa Cruz my freshman year, 2002. Really on the more unofficial scale, but really driving a lot of the events, the actions, and then went to an SSDP conference when I was 19 in Long Beach. So it's been 20 years that I've been in cannabis advocacy. It's been a minute. And
then were you a teacher out of school?
Yes, absolutely. So I was I was always a patient first. So even though I was a public school teacher, I always had my medical card. I always used it, medicinally. I don't think that, I started using it in 6th grade. I've been smoking it, selling it, and growing it since middle school. So it was never considered, I didn't think about it as a medicine. It was just kind of everywhere and very ubiquitous. But then once I got to college and started seeing that people were getting locked up for it, that there was a medical conversation around it, the Prop 215 era, that really made me realize, oh, this is like a human rights and medical sovereignty and bodily autonomy issue. And so I ended up, being able to still utilize the medicine while I was teaching, and even kind of work on the side. And at some point I realized, this is my passion. I want to go into it full time. So after 10 years teaching, I moved into cannabis full time.
What did you teach?
I taught middle school history and high school English.
Okay. So if you taught middle schoolers, did that give you the ability to be patient with pretty much anybody in the industry then?
It's funny you say that. Everyone asks me, isn't it a crazy transition going from teaching into cannabis? And I'm like, actually, you're repeating the same simple ideas over and over with tons of patience and compassion and love. You're having to deal with emotionally immature people. You're, a lot of people who don't know how to share, who don't know how to keep their hands to themselves, don't know how to talk nice. It's actually very similar. We're all just middle schoolers, that our bodies kept growing, but our curiosities, our emotional needs are really the same as when we were preteens. So it's actually funny you say that. It's quite analog. Yeah.
So when you decided to jump fully into the industry, what was that transition like?
It was really easy. I was really lucky. I was working with Pura Vida, which was the first organic gluten-free edible on the market. And they already were in several stores in the Bay Area. And then I started working with Jetty Extracts, and we were one of the first vape technology, vape companies out there in 2014-15. And we were one of maybe 3 or 4 different cartridge companies out with, Care by Design, which later became Absolute Extracts. Bloom was in the early stage, Bloom Farms. And maybe a handful of maybe others, Gola Drop, and that was it. So we were a novelty, and we were offering CBD before anyone else was. I remember people were laughing at me. Why would I pay $5 more for something that's less psychoactive? And I had to explain to them, like, not all cannabinoids need to get you high. And they were like laughing me out. This is 10 years ago. Now, obviously CBD, is a household term now. But I really, there were so many yeses. It pulls in the advocacy, lobbying, all the things that, as educators, we had to always be advocating for more funding, safer work environments, labor. I unionized our the first charter school in Berkeley Unified School District. So, labor and fair practices has always been really important to me. I'm, raised by activist Jews from New York City with master's degrees that protested the war. And, we were picketing outside of, my grandfather got kicked out of the home for Jewish parents. We were picketing because we believed it was, related to bias and all these things. Like from 5 years old, I was picketing. And I was just always told that if you don't say something, silence is violence. And as, descendant of survivors of the Holocaust, you learn that if, you see something, you say something. And if something's wrong, you do something about it. And so as this very empowered, educated young Jewish woman, I've seen so many other people without that privilege, without that literacy, without those access to resources, and was like, I need to give back and be for other people what, we never had as Eastern European Jews. We were like rejected by most countries, including the United States, as we were trying to flee for a better life from persecution. And you see it happening within the United States, whether it's, native Black and brown folks, indigenous people, queer people. There's just so many things that intersect in cannabis that I was like, I want to change these perceptions, these, racist lenses that are put on this drug war that the Reagans started and Anslinger started, and really was like, how can I use, my education, my advocacy elements, with the fact that I love weed. It sells itself. I'm naturally a good salesperson because I care about the plant, the product, my company, which translates into sales. So it was a really easy transition in the sense that, there was no stretch intellectually or in my hard skills other than maybe having to like learn Salesforce or figure out that people aren't using emails. Like if you're dealing with a dispensary buyer, they're not going to be utilizing email or answering anything in the technological world. So there were certain small things that I had to realize, like, oh, as a grower, you have X amount of legal, just how to interface with the law, how to know your rights and play in the gray area, how to, remain respectful to the legacy and honor our rights as human beings, but also try to still follow the laws, make sure that the state of California is getting what it needs so that we can continue incremental change to transition in a way that everywhere else around the world is going to look at us and copy and paste the way they did the equity program for Oakland. Like everyone's looking to California, how California goes the country and goes the world. And so that's why when I travel globally, I try to tell them, like, these are the things we did really well. These are the landmines in legalization or regulation that really should have been decriminalization or descheduling, and how to make it so that we can like bring access to this plant without oppressing and destroying so many people's lives.
How have you maintained that passion for advocacy over the last more than 20 years when, it's been drips and drabs or incremental change?
That's a great question. It's a blend of things. I'm really involved in a lot of women's networking groups. I have a lot of really good friends. I think that especially for a woman in a male-dominated industry and very sexist culture, having like a group of women that see you, that feel you, that hear you, that help you process things, helps you get back in the ring and feel refreshed, and kind of like you're getting that emotional coaching on the back end when you're feeling frustrated. I'm not sure how many people, and it doesn't have to be a gendered support group. I have a lot of male mentors and friends that help guide me through the ups and downs and some of the disappointments. But I think having that community is really important. Also, if you don't genuinely care about this and this hasn't touched your life and you're not a patient and you haven't seen people's dogs be shot by cops or kids taken away from them by CPS or people having to move countries or states because they're medical refugees for their kids having seizures, if you don't have a real tie to why this is an urgent life-threatening movement for for bodily autonomy, if that's not something that makes you get up, like sit up in bed in the morning and go, oh my gosh, what are we going to do to change this? Then you probably shouldn't be in the cannabis space, and you probably won't stay in the cannabis space, because if you're not intrinsically tied to purpose, this plant will bounce you. So I think that that's, it called me. I always say that the plant chose me and the plant chose us to do this work, because it is kind of like an abusive relationship. There's so many ups and downs. You're staying together for the kids meaning, social change and regulation, legalization, decriminalization. We're sticking around to see this end goal. But in the meantime, we're being very gaslit. We're being told that this has no medical efficacy, that it's highly addictive, and like all of these things that we know clinically, factually, and anecdotally are false. And we're still being told by the systems that benefit from the prison industrial complex and from big pharma that we can't grow something in our backyard that heals 90% of our ailments and prevents 80% of the things that will kill us. That is a conspiracy. It's the definition of a conspiracy. So there's some degree of injustice that, like, there's something that needs to be changed that is actively harming society. That's a pretty easy lever to move, considering the impact. For example, Leonard Peltier, Bless Leonard Peltier. He's 80 years old, almost dead, spent most of his life in prison for a crime he did not do. And he just got pardoned by Biden. We're seeing the pardons of some of these nonviolent cannabis offenders, but some of these people are spending, Edwin Rubiz has been in jail for 40 years. He's serving he's served 27 years of a 40-year sentence, first time offense, nonviolent cannabis offense in Georgia, I believe. And his sentence hasn't been commuted, and Biden's out here pardoning his son, and he's not pardoning people like that. So I feel like, how do you not, stay committed when you see these just egregious human rights violations? I don't know. I can't just go about my daily life and just be a business person and do my thing while I'm seeing this stuff happen. I think that that's really scary, that a lot of people tune it out and don't make social justice causes a main part of their work.
When you were talking about
no judgment, but
what's that?
No judgment, but you could call a senator every once in a while. Not everything has to be all capitalism all the time. Sometimes people can volunteer and do something that's not directly related to money in their pocket.
No, I completely agree. But I do think, that's one of the things that I do enjoy about this industry, is that there are more people like yourself, passionate and willing to go kind of the extra mile to protect and build the community rather than just profit off of it.
Well said. Protecting and building. I don't think that that's something that transactional greed capitalism has a framework for. It's extraction, alienation, extraction, and that's not sustainable from a business perspective, and it's not sustainable with an agricultural product that's, a magical, mystical plant that doesn't just get it's not just a square peg in a round hole. She has really unique needs and a beautiful essences about her that are not easily quantifiable, scalable, replicable. You can't, put a number on all of these things. And I think that it's really making very numbers oriented, results oriented people kind of in a conundrum and breaking their brain a little bit, because they're like, wait, I can't, this could be the golden goose if we stop strangling it. If we stopped over-regulating, over-taxing, over-controlling it, we could have access really high-quality medicine made by a diverse group of producers at an easy to decent cost that is available by drop shipping. That is happening with kratom. That is happening with sex enhancement pills. It's happening with e-cigarette and nicotine. It's happening with alcohol. I can get all of those things delivered in the next half a day or less to my door for a very reasonable amount of money. And many of those are very harm-causing, unregulated, addictive, and chemically derived things that are not plant medicine, that don't have thousands of years of history of evolving with our endocannabinoid system that we have proof of, in our anthropology. Our biological anthropology has proven that we've been working with this plant. Look at these tombs in China that are 3,000 years old. They buried them with shit ton of hemp. The guy was literally buried in a tomb of hemp with hemp seeds, THC and regular, hemp seeds. It's like, this is not, a new trend. It's like quinoa. It's like, yeah, quinoa, these are thousands of year old plants that our bodies have been co-evolving with. It's not new. So I think that that's part of our job too, is just kind of reminding people that it's actually an unlearning of the propaganda and a relearning and a returning to ourselves. Yeah, I think that that's the most important thing that cannabis has taught me, is the autonomy piece of I have everything I need in my body to heal myself. All I need is me and this seed and the other things you need, soil, air, water, that you need for to survive as a human, but nothing additional. It's not like you need a laboratory. It's not like you need FDA approval. You don't need multiple chemical processes, or even with some other plant medicines like wachuma and mescaline containing plants and DMT containing plants. These are very extreme processes of processing these plants. Cannabis, you can pop it in your mouth, you can juice it, you can burn it and inhale the smoke that comes off of it, you can rub it on yourself. It's literally telling you, I'm easy to grow, I'm a weed, and I work all over your body for most things, and very few people are going to have adverse reactions, and none of them are going to be death. I don't understand how there's so much effort being put into tamping this down if it wasn't an actual conspiracy by people that are making money off of us going to the orange bottle instead of the green bottle. That's the only explanation, really, at this point.
So at what part of unwinding that conspiracy are we right now?
I've been very impressed, like I said, about looking back to 10 years ago when people were laughing me out of their dispensaries for having a CBD product. I mean, the hearts and minds adoption rate has been very fast. From the time that we legalized in California in 2018 till now, it's been what, 6, 7 years, 7 years? Like, we've made huge um bounds, leaps and bounds. The problem is the rescheduling to Schedule 3, which may happen, and also the consolidation of these Canadian companies and these publicly traded companies. Up, full disclosure, we're one of them, but we're not in cannabis. We're on the hardware side, technology side, but there has been on the brand side a big consolidation of big boys coming in and just kind of like gobbling up all the little guys, firing everyone, like running the businesses to the ground and then fire selling them. So a lot of these, there's been a brain drain that's like really left. A lot of the expertise and the passion has left the cannabis industry. So I think that as far as the average consumer, people, maybe are a little bit mad that prices are more, or that it's, there's not as many dispensaries, or they don't get buy one, get one freebies and patient appreciation days anymore since it's gone to, regulation of commercialization. But for the most part, you can just purchase it online and get it delivered to your house anywhere in almost all of the United States. Psychoactive cannabinoids, whether it's hemp derived or medical marijuana derived, you can get psychoactive cannabinoids delivered to your door at the gas station in 5 minutes for under $10. So I think that part is really exciting as a business person, as a craft grower, as a geneticist, as a breeder, as a soil scientist, as a permaculture focused person. I'm devastated to see the small farm community being decimated by regulation, overtax control and regulate, and by competition in the marketplace. People like, I'm not going to say who, in the Central Valley of California, who have, stacked licenses or have huge grows that are bottoming out the pricing in California and making it so that craft, artisanally grown, whole plant, living soil, permaculture minded grow, and organically grown cannabis is not affordable. And so they're going to these mega conglomerates that are funded by, basically it's the same story as alcohol. It's the same story as anything craft, right? So I think that there's two stories in cannabis. There's the story of, and this is true for plant medicine too, right? It's like, yeah, it's like free all plant medicine, but then there's like the peyote holders that are like, well, we still need to protect peyote. So like, yeah, we want to like decriminalize certain medicines, but the way we decriminalize them, the way that we're giving access and scaling needs to be respectful to the plant, to the earth, to the indigenous people who've been, stewarding it for a long time, to our bodies. And if we're trying to scale cannabis the same way that we have as Advil and have it in every single, cabinet pill box in America, in everyone's, what do you call it? Their medicine cabinet. There's a lot of corners that are going to have to be cut. We've seen Marinol doesn't work and is really harmful. Like you can't grow. The best cannabis in the world is sun grown in soil. That can't be sustainable if every person in the world is going to have that kind of cannabis. It is very hard to scale that with the way that we've set up our monoculture and the way that we grow food and the way that we grow agricultural products. There's no room for growing cannabis at scale, especially because we've been using pesticides for so long that a lot of these pesticides stay in the soil for 30 to 40 years, and we can't grow cannabis because we've polluted almost permanently with forever chemicals our soil and water system. So there's a lot of reasons why, it just depends on there's people who have different priorities. It's like, if your priority is access and scale, yes, that's worked in the sense that you can get it delivered anywhere, and the underground market is blowing up to your neighbor dealer is still going to sell you that sack for $30. Like, you're going to get your weed. So the average person can still get cheap weed on the black market, but can get, maybe higher quality, maybe lower quality for way more money in a safe setting where they can talk to a bud tender in a licensed facility where there's certificates of analysis showing that these products are safe. There's a lot of pros and cons, but that is at an unprecedented level. Being able to, bring a vape pen to a Thanksgiving dinner now versus even 5, 6, 7 years ago, and having my uncles not only, not get angry about it or make me go outside, but are curious about it and maybe even want one. That kind of thing that I've been seeing, and not, this is the proverbial Thanksgiving table, right? It's like, I'm seeing a lot of baby boomers come to me on Facebook, my former colleagues when I taught in high school, who were always looking at me like the young hippie teacher who hated me. They were like the old, like English, like conservative English teacher, or like the jock, soccer teacher or whatever. They're like, my wife has cancer. I've been seeing you post for the last 15 years about weed. I might have some questions. Those are the kinds of things that I've been really heartened by, and really being like, okay, we might save some lives. Like, this might be an intervention point where people are actually not only has the fear mongering and the disinformation been removed, but there's been enough education to actually create curiosity and a new market, and like a can of curious group of people that are not only accepting of it, but like maybe would recommend it for one of their friends or would try it themselves. That is something we haven't seen. So, that is really exciting. On the other hand, as far as just like being from Northern California, it's been devastating. It's been multiple extinction events. Most of my favorite companies have gone out of business in absolute flames. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars lost or in debt to their friends and family. These were not traditional institutional loans. These were $50,000 from 15 of your closest friends. Devastating for the economy. A lot of people in Northern California have lost their lives to drug addiction and suicide due to the lack of economic stimulus from the trimmers not being there, the farms getting closed down, the way that that the regulations kind of cordoned off what was commercial, ag, residential, really destroyed, multi-generational farms. So it's been very sad, very heartbreaking. We've lost people like Frenchie Cannoli, folks like Swami, all of our elders that can't afford to really do this work anymore. A lot of these legacy dispensaries that have been open since the Prop 215 era in San Francisco, they're closing down every day. They're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. People can't even sell their licenses. The equity programs were a total bust. They basically made it so that if you wanted a license, you had to partner with someone who had been hit by the war on drugs. But then once you got their license, you could get a general license, but then they can't transfer their license. They can't sell it. They basically all went out of business. So all these, well-funded, decently funded, or not folks of color run businesses were able to use people's identities and harm that was done to them, whether they were incarcerated for drugs or they came from a community that was highly policed, whatever the criteria was. They were using them as a stepping stone and ended up consolidating their assets and their access to that license, and left 90% of them have horror stories. So we have a lot of work to do. We've made a lot of mistakes. We, didn't organize well. NCIA and Normal are begging for money for lobbying. No one wants to give money to help lobby. So we're stuck on the state and the federal level. People don't show up to city council meetings. They don't write to their lawmakers. There's a lot of apathy in the business community, and ever since, we legalized, all the patients sit back. No one advocates or is an activist anymore. Everyone got kind of lazy. So I'm pretty disappointed to see how complacent and entitled the California market got with what little we had to fight for SB 34 to bring compassion back into cannabis, because we were able to give away free weed before 64 passed. And then all of a sudden you had to pay taxes on the retail value of whatever you were donating. So if I'm donating $1,000 worth of product, I'm having to pay, 25, 30%, several $100s on, I'm already losing the money on donating it. So we had to fight to get that put back in. But, by that time it was already a few years in, and these businesses are so highly tax controlled and regulated. No one has the extra money or the margins to be able to allow for this sense of abundance where they could just, give some money and donate some money. It's not like that anymore. Back in the day when we were balling and we had extra cash, all of these transformational festivals, Burning Man was going off, lightning in a bottle. And you've noticed everyone's like, oh, we're all the festies. What do you think that we were all laundering our fucking weed money through? It was all of arts, the arts and entertainment. And we were buying big pieces of art and throwing these huge festivals because we had cash and nowhere to put it. We're able to pay everyone really well. I was getting paid as a college kid $200. It was to in a work day, you could trim about a pound, give or take a little bit, depending on how good you were. You would either get $200 or in cash, or you would get an ounce, which back then you could drive back down and sell for $300-400 in the Bay Area. That's when pounds here were going for $2,000-3,000, and we were sending them to the East Coast for $5-6 grand. As a 20-year-old, I bought my house off of that. in the Bay Area, $1 million house that's now worth $1 million. I bought 400,000 15 years ago off of that. I mean, hopefully this is not incriminating, but so allegedly, but that's unbelievable. That doesn't exist for the middle class. That we and everyone we were buying organic soil. All the trimmers were getting paid. We were eating organic food and feeding everyone. We were staying in really nice accommodations. We were covering people's gas. We were making sure everyone was safe, picking people up from the airport. Like we were a really sophisticated, high quality. Everyone won. The local soil, businesses, the CVS with the turkey bags and the Fisker scissors, everyone was getting a trickle down effect in the economy from us doing this work. Once that got removed, the entire, the Emerald Triangle, Trinity County, Mendocino County, and Humboldt County have become economically and energetically very depressed. And if people haven't left, they've stayed. And if you talk to anyone from there, they will just shake their head or roll their eyes and are just heartbroken. It has been when they call it an economic extinction event, it sounds dramatic. It's actually pretty literal. It's not an exaggeration.
Are you encouraged by efforts to reschedule?
I mean, I'm an anarchist. I'm not encouraged by anything that the government touches. I think that they are incompetent and indirect. The oligarchs have the opposite best interests in mind from the average person. So I've never met a politician, even at my local level. Maybe my like city level, a couple people, but for the most part, I find that the people that are in the positions to make these decisions are skew very, very sociopathic, narcissistic, and pathological. And so I don't trust anything. That said, I believe that the benefit of rescheduling means that we get more people out of jail and that we can have clinical testing on something that we've been told, this catch-22 where it's Schedule 1 because there's no medical efficacy, but there's no medical efficacy because it hasn't been proven. But you can't test on things that are Schedule 1. So we've been in this cycle of hell. So I think that breaking the cycle of hell will be nice, but now you've given it to pharma. The only things on Schedule 3 are made in a pharmaceutical lab. And I also do not trust pharmaceutical labs because they have always messed up plant analogs. They've tried to recreate 5-MeO-DMT in Bufo. They've tried to recreate cannabis through Marinol. They've tried to recreate heroin through methadone or whatever. They make monsters. The pharmaceuticals make horrible versions that are more addictive and life-threatening compared to the safe thousands of years experience with these plants. So I think that if the pharma model and the system and structure changed, where we had people that had a background in science and medicine involved, that were not being fed by Pfizer and big pharma to say what they want, and we were putting money into actually really testing the efficacy of plant medicines in their full plant, whole natural form, then a rescheduling would be fabulous. It would mean that, we had safe, scalable products that you could get at a pharmacy that a doctor could recommend. You're not going to lose your veterans associate your VA benefits. You're not going to lose your Section 8 housing benefits. You're not going to lose your SNAP benefits. You're not going to lose your FAFSA benefits to get school loans to get an education. You're not going to get, lose your children from CPS or lose your ability to be a foster parent or to adopt. These are major, major, major barriers that Schedule 1 relegation has put upon people using this plant. So yes, people will get out of prison, less people will go into prison, but it's going to do nothing for the sanctity of the plant medicine, as I was stating before, about how it should be grown like in the soil and with consciousness and like by people, like by women and people of color and indigenous folks and people who've been working with this plant traditionally for thousands of years, who know what it needs. It's just like these wildfires in California right now. It's like we went from locking up all these indigenous elders for doing controlled burns, and now we're hiring them, Cal Fire is hiring them as consultants to help us. It's just like we already have the knowledge. Like we just need to get out of our own way. And so, I mean, I say the quick answer, maybe you can splice this so that the end of it goes at the beginning, but deschedule or bust. Deschedule, deschedule, deschedule. You cannot half bake saying that something is safe and efficacious. You cannot half bake it. It's either safe and efficacious or it's not. And if it's safe and efficacious, we do not need big pharma controlling it. It has shown that, and here's a fun fact for your listeners and for you. Do you know why cannabis is not life-threatening on a molecular level, why you can't die from cannabis unless there's a very, very extreme, weird situation. We have no cannabinoid receptors in our central nervous system. Our spinal column does not receive cannabinoids. It cannot override our central, our hub the way that alcohol and other drugs can. So what do? Three things. You either vomit, you go to sleep, or you have a micro panic attack. But very rarely, other than maybe having some lasting psychological impact, if you already had pre-existing psychosis or schizophrenia, nothing happens to you other than you get really annoyed, you scare your friends, maybe you call 911, but all you do is you sleep it off or you throw up or both. That's all that happens. So,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, or ask, were you expecting more when it came to commutations and pardons at the end of Biden's administration?
Yes. Pardoning his son and not Edwin Rubies, like I was saying. Shame. And Leonard Peltier was easy. He's 80 years old and he's been already proven innocent, and they were going to do it for medical reasons anyway. He was so sick that they do it anyway. So he gets to play like this superhero. He is a shameful president. Even I don't like Trump. I am very upset that he's going to be president. I find him to be a misogynistic, sexist, horrible business person who is very dangerous in the way that he acts publicly. Personally, I'm just going to say that. I'm not Republican or Democrat. Like I said, I think the whole system is an oligarchy. I don't trust any of these people. None of them remind me of anyone I know. They all freak me out. However, Corvain Cooper released at 11:59 in the final hour of Trump's presidency. Even him had the decency to let people go, whether it was just for his ego. It doesn't even matter why. We all know that he's not a good person with a good heart. He does things for optics and clout. That's undeniable. This person's not a bleeding heart, thinking about them home and getting warm and fuzzies with their family. But even Trump knew to let a bunch of our friends go in the final hour. I'm not sure if Luke Scarmazzo was part of that. Last Prisoner Project, shout out Last Prisoner Project, working tirelessly to get this through. The fact that you would not release nonviolent cannabis prisoners is proof that the prison industrial complex has the democratic institution by the cojones, straight up. And I don't really think there's that big of a difference between red and blue. The only difference I think with maybe a Trump era is just personality politics. And I think that he's just crazy enough to maybe do something like deschedule just because he wants the fanfare and he wants to like stick it to the system. I don't think there's like a lot of thought or strategy or intellect behind it. I think it's just kind of knee jerk, like what's going to get big press and be huge news and all these things. That's the only reason I do think maybe a Republican led, cannabis movement might be more dramatic for cannabis than the Democrats, because they're so tied into pharma and the prison industrial complex. Like, until we stop making money from people being in prison, we're gonna keep seeing this. Like, that's the thing, is we have to stop making money off of Black and brown bodies. Like, it's crazy that they're 20% of the country's population, but 70 to 80% of our prison population. They're not more likely to commit crime. Black and brown people are not predisposed to being criminal. This is a policing issue. This is a policy issue, and it's an internal and intrinsic bias issue, from a structural level, a hegemonic level, from bottom to top. And that's why we need plant medicine and cannabis to come in and give language to this and let folks know that what's true for cannabis is also true for women's bodies. We're seeing our ability to control our bodies being taken away. We are getting constitutional rights rolled back. So these are analogs when you're looking at a cannabis perspective and a bodily autonomy lens. Many other things fall under that. Seatbelt laws, organics, honesty and labeling in our food. This is not just cannabis. Building literacy around these rights and these responsibilities actually has helped build a whole kind of generation of people that are involved in civics now, because as cannabis activists, we didn't know how to get petitions signed and go to city council and learn about public comment. You have 2 minutes. You're not trained in high school how to be a civic advocate and how to engage with. I was 40 years old when I first started lobbying. I had no idea. At 39, actually, when I walked in to Sacramento and DC that you can literally, as long as you don't have a gun or arms on you, if you can walk in Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 office hours, walk into the halls of City Hall, whatever city or state you're in, and you can walk in and walk to their office and sit with the staffer and either get an appointment to see them right there or get an appointment in the future and walk in and talk to someone and be like, I'm upset about this. And they take a note and they write it down. Like, it was so cathartic and so direct action. I was like, wait a second. I've been paying all this money all this year, all this time, and you literally are everyone's doors are open and you have to listen to me. And if I have a veteran with me, I'm for sure walking into that office and getting a lunch meeting with you. Like, what? That's the thing that I don't think people realize until we got into cannabis, that like we pay these people to work for us. Their fancy overstuffed leather couches in DC are paid by our tax dollars. So sit on that beautiful overstuffed fancy $1,000 leather chair. Like that, you paid for that. Sit there and tell them that your friends had to move states because their kids can't get the medicine they need, that that you lost your housing because you were growing a plant in your closet. Like, they cannot change laws unless they have anecdotal factual stories from constituents and other people that tell them, my friend got shot outside of a dispensary, he's a security guard because of the Safe Banking Act is not gone through and they're holding $100,000 in cash in their dispensary and my homies are getting shot. They need to know where, when, who, and what that is for them to change the law. They can't just wake up one day and say, we're going to legalize weed. They need those 3 stories that I just said and say, you know what, we have a constituent that's having some real, measurable harm in their lives that is impacting a lot of people in the community. That is what changes the social movement. So I think that's my hope, is that people, get more involved in general, in their city building ordinances, how they're using, materials, how the parks are being built. Like, I've become more engaged in the world around me because cannabis has taught me that, nothing's going to change unless we are a part of it and we know the way it's supposed to be. We know what's good for kids and animals and the air and the environment. The capitalism will never do what's right for the earth unless, they're in a B Corp situation like Patagonia, where they are, have checks and balances that ensure that they're giving back as much as they're taking, that there's some accountability structure and checks and balances. But until we have that, cannabis advocates and lovers need to fight really hard to protect her integrity. We don't want to be another tobacco industry. We don't want to be another alcohol industry. We do not need more of these industries. We need responsible. This is why I like iSpire's. The tagline is the responsible vaping revolution. It's like age gating, youth prevention. Like, we're putting millions of dollars into R&D to have point of use age gating so that, you can have point of sale. Everyone knows that kids are going to get vapes. Everyone knows that point of sale doesn't stop alcohol and nicotine sales. We have a way to identify an identity on an actual vape using, NFC technology like Clear, that actually make sure that the person opening it up is 21 or over, or 18 or over, depending on, like, those are the kinds of initiatives that we need to be looking into that are we can walk into some of these governmental rooms and say, hey, by the way, you don't need to be this fear-mongering far extremist side. And we also don't need to be this kind of head in the sand hippies where say, weed works for everyone and everything and it's 100% safe. There are ways to allow people to have access to this plant that allow for, safety and legalities and ways that, the EU GMP certifications, all of these high level certifying bodies are going to be comfortable implementing. They can dose them. They know that they don't have contaminants. They know that they can scale it. There are ways to ensure that there are proper dosing guidelines and age gating. Like, we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So it's like, it's not about what it is, it's about how we do it. And if we're not in that conversation, we're going to be on the back end of it and we're not going to like it. This is what we saw with regulation and legalization in 2018 with 64. Everyone just fought. All the growers and all the hippies were like, no. And then the business people were like, yeah. But instead of finding like a way to make it work in between, it just became one extreme. Instead of it being a collective model, it just became a hyper consolidated, over tax controlled and regulated, where no one can win, where it actually crushed small. It's the most un-American thing I've ever seen is what happened in California. You were supposed to incentivize small businesses And they're doing the opposite. There's no loans. There's no way to bank. There's no onboarding services for new businesses to give them how to run a business. There were no PPP loans. When people lose things, there's no way to get insurance. And you're paying $16,000 a month to have a kind of dur guy out front who's like getting paid literally hundreds of dollars an hour to have a gun out front because you can't be a normal business, and you just have some random dude that your life is depending on, this guy who's checking his phone on his break. No offense, we love our security guards, but they're not like a highly skilled, highly educated bunch. They're skilled in what they do, but they're not thinking always about protecting a business or customer service. A lot of times they're checked out and they're just getting a paycheck, and you're literally paying like a full salary, more of a salary than you are to your managers, to have them out front.
So what is it like being labeled one of the most important women in weed?
First of all, I think that all of these awards and namings are really interesting because we're a small space. So at some point, if you're on a list, it's very sweet, and I really love it, and I appreciate the acknowledgement. But really, it's like, I just wish more people did what I did. Like, I remember hearing an interview with Ani DeFranco when I was little, and she was like, yeah, all these like women coming up to me and thanking me for being like a loud feminist and not shaving my armpits and like being bisexual openly and like doing all these things. Like, they thank me because they can't. And she's like, it actually angers me. She actually is like, don't thank me, like do it yourself. Like, I'm doing extra work because you're not. Like, I don't need to be an inspiration for you so that you can feel some cathartic release that someone's doing it. So if it's putting people on a pedestal because then you feel like, oh, someone's being an activist for the plant, I can continue squirreling my nuts over here. If it's something that inspires you to do the same, if it's something that's like, oh, she's only in her late 30s, early 40s, like she has a master's degree and has like an executive job in cannabis, I could do it. If it's inspiring for people, then that makes me feel really good. But I get a little weary and wary of these awards ceremonies and I'm a judge for a lot of them. I'm a presenter at a lot of them. I respect and love all these organizations, and I really love the celebrations. It's so fun that we acknowledge each other because it is very stressful and very hard work. But there's definitely this self-aggrandizing, self-congratulatory kind of circle of mutual admiration that feels good because I'm in it. But I hope that it's not like alienating, or that it doesn't feel like the popular kids club, or that it's a pay to play. Like, that's the only concern, is not getting so into the fact that like I'm like a upper middle class white educated woman, making money off of a plant that people who don't look like me, who don't come from a background that I come from, are rotting in jail for. So it's a mix. It's a two-sided coin for me. I obviously, my ego and my self-love are like really happy that I'm a role model and that people hear what I have to say. Like, people like you invite me on here. Like, that's super meaningful to me to know that, I've built unbelievably successful and beautiful companies and brands that I really am proud of their mission and what they've done, and the product and the people. Like, I've undeniably made this space better than I found it in spades. So that I do really feel appreciated for having the spotlight. But I'm just a humble educator. At the end of the day, I didn't get into this to be a cannabis celebrity or be famous or have people kissing my butt or like acknowledging me left and right. Like, obviously I love it. I'll post about it on LinkedIn. I, print it out, put it on my fridge, so to speak, send it to my mom. My mom reposted on Facebook. Like, these are beautiful accomplishments that I would do even if I had stayed in teaching. I was getting awards in teaching. I won a bunch of Teacher for Social Justice awards. And like I said, I was responsible for unionizing the first charter school in Berkeley Unified, which is a famous school district in the United States. So there's always an element where you want to be seen and kind of elevated for the work you're doing, but you want to separate like the person from the work. Like, I appreciated Canna Portugal for giving me the global legalization like awareness award or something. There was like, global normalization. There was something about like going around the world and helping other people come online. Like, I liked that it wasn't about me. It was about the work I was doing, or like, what makes me an important woman in cannabis? Is it just because I am a woman in cannabis? Is it because that's just my gender identity? Like, what about me being a woman in cannabis makes the cannabis space better? Is it because of the impact programs that I put out there? Whether it's the hygiene bags we do with advanced nutrients for our homeless and housing insecure Secure Neighbors in LA? Is it the donations we give to women and indigenous organizations, to, the sponsorships for equity organizations, to, sponsoring the women's lounge at MJ BizCon? Like hundreds of thousands of dollars I give and donate to causes. Is that because I'm a woman? Is that my network of women that's bringing really beautiful cause-based initiatives into my realm that I can then power and fund? Like, if that's what I'm being congratulated for being a woman in cannabis, then like highlight that, not just the fact that I have boobs. Like, big whoop, you know? You don't want to gender essentialize too much, but until women are not a minority in this space, we kind of have to. But in general, I'm really looking forward to a time when the whole women branded and women groups and all that stuff goes away. It's not ideal. It feels very much reactive and in response to isms, instead of it being from a place of power. It feels like it's like a girls' club because the world's mean, and it's like we got to get to an abundant place where we don't need to like separate on gender.
Well, staying on that topic a little bit, how, in your opinion, what would be the most successful way to have more female leaders and entrepreneurs in the cannabis market?
Have more hiring managers that are women. There are so many intrinsic biases, even though people say, oh, it was merit-based. Unconsciously, if old white dudes are interviewing other old white dudes, they connect on their kids are the same age, they play golf at the same club, cool watch, I have that car, blah blah blah. It's super fun. I love when I meet other people like me, when I meet young women that are like me, that have dogs. Like, we all do it. We all want to work with people that remind us of ourselves. That's why I said it's unexamined internal bias. I don't think men only want to work with men. I think men do want to hire women, but when the person writing the job description is not female, when the person screening for the job applicants is not female, when the person running the first round of interviews there's no females involved, the final hiring manager, whoever's going to manage them, if there's no women in that process, you are unintentionally not allowing women to come through. And like I said, I don't believe that dudes are sexist naturally towards women. I don't believe that hiring managers, in fact, I almost feel like they're so nervous because of this woke DEI stuff that they're trying to bring on more women and folks of color. And then the backslide of that is now they're bringing on someone who fits one of those, and they might not be that good. We've also had, I've seen that in the cannabis industry, a lot of like this concept of diversity hires is very problematic, because most of the time, folks of color and women are very good at their jobs, but there are times when people are just being brought on because they're like, well, we don't have enough Black women on this team, and they bring on a bunch of Black women, and they weren't ready for the role. They didn't have the experience, and they set them up for failure. And now it makes the hiring manager less likely to want to hire that group, which is not that group's fault. And it disincentivizes that group from continuing to want to work in cannabis. Everyone loses. It's like setting people up for failure. So it's like you also want to make sure that it's merit-based, and that the role, that the identity is not more important than the effectiveness for the role. So I think that that's been a really big and an important thing. I think that if you're not bringing women into HR, you're not going to have female hires unless that woman is being told by the CEO or a patriarch at the company overtly, under the table, unofficially, like, we want really like corporate sales guys. And even though they don't have to say men, if you make something so narrow that it's only going to serve X amount of people, like certain roles, like if you want 20 years of enterprise sales in nicotine, you're not going to find a female executive. They're just not there. So there's certain things that are hard. Like in our space, it's like we have a bunch of old white men in our company because that's who's traditionally been in the nicotine and hemp spaces for all these years. That's just what it is. So, we don't have 40 years to grow and train a female leadership to hire into these things. So part of it is just the backwash of a century of sexism in the workplace, that there's nothing we can do about it. If we need someone who has 30 years of engineering experience in vape technology and who speaks Chinese, we're not going to get very many female applicants. Maybe we do, but then she's also a mom, and she's also older, and there's all these other things that, like, most hiring managers are like looking for someone who's like young and single and is going to answer their phone call at 5 p.m. I'm not speaking for iSpire, obviously. I'm pretty impressed by our hiring practices, but in general, in cannabis, it's like if you have like a really experienced older woman who has kids that are almost out of the house but not quite, versus like some young inexperienced dude who's like single and is willing to work 95-hour weeks and not going to stand up when someone makes a sexist joke at the office, they'll go for the one that makes their lives easier. The broy dude that they can do, drugs and drink with in Vegas in front of, and they're not going to tell their wives, versus like someone like me who's like has a master's degree, is like a grown ass woman who's going to respond when like inappropriate things are happening. I'm not a wet rag. I'm super chill and like down to earth, and I let people have fun, but it's different to have like a mom vibe in the room versus like a young kid. When cannabis is, it's up to us. We don't have third party ombudsmen. We don't have background checks and live scans. We don't call references. We hire based on who makes us feel good and who we want to work with. And that's why we have that's why we have a broy male culture in cannabis. I hate to say it, and I don't want to throw anyone under the bus or sound negative, but like there's a reason why women run away from this, from this space. It's super sexual harassy. Like some of these trade shows, it's unbelievable. I'm at the lobby bar and people are hitting on me like it's 1990 and we're not at a professional event. I'm like, it is literally 2025. I'm probably 10 years older than you think I am. I'm in the industry. You might just think I'm just at the lobby bar, and it's like I'm literally on a panel with you tomorrow and you don't even realize, like, you're so drunk and grabbing at me. And it's just like, wow, it's like you put on the suit and you have a great bio and a great resume and you're on LinkedIn, you have 20,000 followers, and you're an absolute slime ball in reality. And luckily, I will say, less than 5% of my interactions in the cannabis space are like that. I can count on two hands the dudes that have made me uncomfortable in cannabis. And I go to thousands of events. I'm around hundreds of thousands of people a year. I 99% of the time, I feel super loved and supported by the men around me. They are warm and conscious and congratulatory, and they share ideas and resources, and they're super protective and conscious. And I love the men in the cannabis industry. That's why I stay in the industry, is because I feel safer as a woman in the cannabis industry than any other business. So I do want to say that when it's gross, it's pretty gross, but we're not one of the worst industries out there. I think we're one of the best. The plant medicine space, I find, really attracts heart-centered, thoughtful, educated men that they love the plant. The plant's a female. So it's like you get female loving men like that really get it and really want to be part of the change and not stop the flow of the magic. You included. Really appreciate you, Patrick, at KCSA, my founder, Michael Wong, my CLO, Stephen Persbala, like the men that I work with, the guys at Jetty that I've worked with, like some of these men have been like my greatest teachers and have allowed me to feel safe enough to do the things that I've done, to be a woman. That's another thing I want to add too, is like being a woman in cannabis, you have to have male allies. You have to have men that are backing you up and not just recycling your ideas and regurgitating them as their own, that are seeing that you maybe are getting underpaid or underappreciated and give you a new role or give you a promotion or change your title. Like the men that have given me a chance in this industry, I owe more to, Guy Rocourt from Papa and Barkley, and now Cleo Wellness, Papa Select, taught me almost everything I know about cannabis. Shout out to Zachary Franklin. He's not in the legal game anymore. Trinity Roots taught me everything I know about cannabis. Like these were men, these were loving, thoughtful, patient men that said, we see something in you and we want you to shine. And I'm not going to steal your shine. I'm not going to get in the way of your shine. I'm not doing it just to sleep with you. I actually am just a nice person that wants to see the women around me shine. Like that's a beautiful thing. And it hasn't been rare. I would say the majority of the men in my life are like genuinely excited to see me and the other women around them, kind of bring our gifts to the space, because they get it. They get that everyone wins. When women are abundant and flowing and doing our thing, everyone wins. Everything's better.
Well, Luna, I really appreciate you taking the time today and just, providing some of your tremendous insight into the industry. Before we get out of here, I wanted to ask, generally, what are your thoughts on the current state of the vape market, and overall, how are things at Ispire?
The vape market is blowing up. Everyone loves vape. It's growing. It's the fastest sector. With that, we need responsibility. So that point of sale or point of use age gating has been really important. This responsible vaping. We're seeing a lot of bans in certain places, but that's because people aren't, realizing that there is a safe way. They're just kind of doing the like zero sum game where they're just like, it's either all or nothing. And I think that we're coming in and we're talking to folks that in like the UK government and different governments to educate them about it's not about whether or not to do it, it's how you do it. So the rollout, are these things, GMP certified, EU GMP certified? Are they safe? Are they, is there a chain of custody that's traceable? Are they dosed properly? These things that have been traditionally very unregulated and very harmful, we're trying to come in with things like the IKE program, the IKE, you guys can look it up. We just did a press release on it. It's that the point of use technology that uses NFC and is actually verifying that person's age and identity before the device even turns on is really, I feel like, going to help this landslide of negativity against vape, because really it does help get people off of smoking. Like most of the executives at my company who were smoking cigarettes got off of it. They vaped to get off of cigarettes and then got off of vaping and were able to quit nicotine completely from it. So we do believe, but then on the other hand, there's also people that can also get addicted to it. So being responsible about, making sure it's only adults. We believe that adults make their own decisions. People can use whatever substances they want. We just have to make sure that they are adults and that the products are safe and tested. So I think that that's been kind of the fun role at iSpire, is being able to work outside of, cannabis and hemp and nicotine into the smart device space for anything. This could be for pharmaceutical applications as well. So we're really seeing a lot of volatility in the market, but as far as use and adoption, more and more people every day are vaping across the board, all substances. And more of these governments are looking for ways to sensibly regulate them instead of just ban them, because they're seeing that what happens when you ban is that you get a really bad unregulated underground market. And if you're talking about public safety, that is a way bigger threat than having a regulated product. So, whether it's the off-gassing of heavy metals and some of the components, if it's some of these bad, really cheap carts, a lot of them, you go back in the factories, no longer there because they're fly-by-night companies. The plastics have, forever chemicals in them that are being released. They're not being stored properly. The battery components are not, secured for safety. They could explode, or they could, burn out from not being a smart battery and overcharging. There's a million reasons why, even just the vitamin E acetate, the additives that they're putting in the actual juice, everything about a vaporizer, if you do it right, can be a really amazing risk mitigation and harm reduction tool. And if it's done, with a bad company with bad faith practices and bad manufacturing practices, it can be life-threatening. So we're really proud to be setting the responsible pace for, vape technology. ISPR, if you're interested, the stock ticker.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time. Before we get out of here, is there anything else that you want to make sure the Cannabis Equipment News audience either knows about yourself or your work at iSpire?
No, I mean, I feel like if you guys are active on LinkedIn and Instagram, I'm Luna Stower there. On Instagram, you have to type Luna_Stower because Meta bans. People are kind of moving over to Blue Sky. I don't know if we need another social media, but I encourage you to follow me on LinkedIn and engage with my posts. I'm always trying to figure out what people's thoughts and opinions are. Also, if you guys have any speaking opportunities, if you guys want me to come through to a podcast, an interview, a panel, a discussion anywhere in the world, I speak Spanish as well. I've done a few presentations in Colombia and in Central and South America. So I really love educating. So if any opportunities come up, there's a cool show or a trade show or expo that you think that I would be a good fit for, or a women's organization, or someone that needs a cool donation or a sponsorship that you think that my role and impact would be able to help support. Like, I'm really just here to answer questions and share my knowledge and experience, because being in cannabis advocacy for over 20 years, I've seen a lot, and I don't want to keep that to myself. I think that it's really important to share the knowledge. So I really appreciate being on today and being given a platform, and really appreciate that you let me go so deep into anarcho-feminist themes on this show. You weren't expecting that, were you, David?
Wasn't expecting that, but hey, it's always welcome.
Hey, it's always good to get a little different perspective. I'm sure that, the cannabis technology and equipment, crowd can skew a little bit more dry. So I figured I'd add a little spunk.
I appreciate the spunk. Thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Shout out to KCSA, our PR company. They always have the best placements, and they're the best team, and they really care about my message and advocate for me. They actually understand what I am talking about and believe that their role in media is to help with movement building and building the revolution along with us. So I think that it's really cool to have people like you guys in media that understand your role in getting the word out. It's really wonderful to work with you guys.
Well, thank you very much. Hopefully we get a chance to talk again soon.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. For Luna Stower, head of impact with iSpire Technology, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast, and we will see you next week.
Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.